Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of Google Partners Academy on Air, where we're going to be talking about measurement. Yay, what users are doing after the click. So first, we're going to start by introducing ourselves. My name is Jessie Hochhalter, and I am on the Sales Strategy and Enablement team here at Google, where I work with our partners and our agencies, making sure that you guys are getting everything you need in terms of training, in terms of sales support, all of that good stuff, and helping our SMBs thrive. So in my previous experience, I've done everything from digital ad ops management to multimedia advertising directing for a newspaper group. And fun fact, I just got back from Australia about 3 days ago. So anything weird I do, I'm going to blame on jet lag. Logan, you want to introduce yourself?
Yes. What's up, everyone? My name is Logan Wellbaum. I'm a technical program manager here at Google for Academy for Ads, as well as a product education specialist. So what that means is I basically try to break down the complexities of our product and make them simpler for all of you to understand. Are we doing fun facts?
Yeah, go for it.
Fun fact, I used to work at an agency before working here at Google. So I know your highs, I know your lows, and I also own my own business. So I've used my own money to use AdWords. And once you use your own money with AdWords, you tend to learn this stuff pretty quickly.
Very nice. I didn't even know that. We'll talk about that later.
Yeah, save it for the questions.
Very good. Yeah, we'll save it. We'll save it. My mom will probably ask about it. She's a regular, as everyone knows here. All right, so let's kick it off. So just kind of setting us up for measurement and what we're going to be talking about here, we really need to understand why measurement is so important in this, new landscape. So what we're seeing, and you guys all know this figure, more than half of all web traffic is now coming from smartphones and tablets. So this is huge. This means a gigantic shift in how people are accessing information, how people are purchasing things, how people are going about their customer journey.
Mm-hmm. And this is interesting because what we're seeing is that mobile is becoming increasingly that research device, and mobile conversion rates are staying similarly, pretty much the same. So what does that mean? What's going on? I mean, I hear all the time, Logan, should I opt out of mobile? Why are we not converting on mobile? Well, the answer is that it's becoming that research device. If you think about it yourself, you're constantly switching between devices when you convert. And we'll get into that a little bit later today. But the main idea is that that mobile is increasingly becoming that research device.
Yes, and you guys may have heard the common adage, mobile broke measurement. We're going to dig into that a little bit more and what that actually means, but that is very, very much true of what's happening here. And the reason is, as you can see here, this guy's, I like to imagine he's out in the woods and he was on a hike and he got himself lost and he's like, oh my gosh, I just realized that it's my girlfriend's birthday and I totally forgot to buy her something. And so he's there and he's on his tablet. Who brings their tablets to the woods, by the way? That's kind of odd. But anyway, he's on his tablet and he's maybe on Etsy searching for something. But the point is, people can search online anytime from anywhere. And this means that there is a hugely complex consumer path and many, many that can happen as you're moving through this journey. So really, really interesting stuff that's happening, like a guy on his tablet in the woods. Never would have seen that 10 years ago. Now, the reason that these paths are so incredibly complex is because, and you guys may have heard this figure before, actually 75%, so 3/4, if I'm good at fourth grade math, of online adults actually start an activity on one device, but then actually continue or finish on another. So 75% of online adults are using multiple devices. This could be 1, it could be 7. So just quick story about how this relates to something that I've done. I know you guys, if you know a lot about me, you know about my shoe problem, my wine problem, my clothes problem. So I was recently in a training, don't tell my trainer, but I was doing the whole looking at my phone under the desk sort of thing. And I saw that I got an email from Free People, which is one of my favorite companies. And I was flipping through and I saw this shirt and I'm like, oh, this is kind of cute. Maybe I'll look at it in black. Oh, it looks good in blue, maybe pink, which is my favorite color, right? But then I kind of got they looked at me and asked me a question and I was like, oh, okay, better put that away. But then when I got home and I had a glass or 2 or 5 of wine, and then I remembered about that shirt, I got on my computer and I purchased, right?
Exactly right. This is happening all the time. I mean, think about it. You're standing in line waiting for coffee. You're trying to book a flight. You're going to be on your phone researching, trying to find the best flight, trying to find where you're, the best location, the best flight option for you. when you get into your office, you're probably going to go to your desktop. You feel more comfortable on maybe it's the checkout process. You feel more comfortable on that device. So this is constantly happening. People are starting on one device and ending the conversion on another device.
Yeah, and it could go the other way too. I mean, I often am at work and it's 4:30 and I'm on my laptop and I'm looking for the best, happy hour spot. And then I actually get on my phone later and that's where I go onto their website and look for directions. So
exactly.
It's happening both ways. The bottom line here, I think, is that I'm an alcoholic. I think that's what I've just admitted to everyone.
I mean, it's sounding like that.
Let's continue. So what this means is that as user behavior evolves, so as we have these really complex paths to purchase, as we have mobile coming here and breaking this measurement for us, we have to adapt how we're actually measuring and how we're analyzing that measurement. So this is really the first step here, is making sure that we're measuring all of the things that matter. Because what tends to happen is a lot of advertisers are really only analyzing a really small sliver of this consumer path. And as this becomes more complex, this final touch point, or this last click or last touch that they're measuring, is an even smaller piece of the overall journey. So I'll give you guys another example from my life. This may or may not be true. I was recently searching online for, I started off my search really general, is Botox safe? And I, found some stuff. I was on a really great blog of a local med spa, and then I searched, who's actually able to do Botox. I searched for what are the before and after pictures. Maybe I was looking at the cost. Is this
right.
still TMI?
No, you're good.
This is good.
Yeah.
Nobody's watching this, right? This isn't live or anything. Cool. This won't be on YouTube later. Hi, Mom. So I was moving through this process and I kept coming in contact with this certain med spa, right? Hypothetically. And then I'm downtown and I see this med spa and I see that they have a big sign that says, free consultations, walk-ins welcome. And so I go in there. And they ask me that common question. All of your clients are asking these questions to their end customers. How did you hear about us? Oh, I was just walking by. Well, what does this do? This attributes all of the value of me as a potential customer, or as that converting customer, to that final touch point, that final, point in the process. The same thing's happening with advertising across the board. Last click or last touch attributions. This is a little sneak peek into what's coming next week. But really what we need to do is we need to understand the entire user journey and look beyond just that final touch point.
Right. And an organization who really gets this down right, attribution, is professional sports teams. You look at, players like Steph Curry or Cristiano Ronaldo. They're constantly the people who are converting on that last, you see that Google logo on the far right. You can consider them your main scorers. And that shopping cart in the far right can be your bucket, or it can be your soccer goal. And there's these different players, there's these different touch points that help these main players score. And sports teams understand this, they know that. That's why that sometimes those assisting players will get paid more than the people who are actually scoring. So if we can take off our marketing lenses for a second and actually apply that to marketing, you're going to find a lot of success. And we'll get into that next week.
Awesome. So this is a really great, kind of intro, kind of teaser into attribution, which is next. But what we're really looking at here is the kind of overall story. Is we really want to make sure we're accurately measuring, attributing what's happening, and then acting on the full user journey in order to unlock new growth opportunities. Because if we're just looking at that last click or last touch, not only are we missing a very key and very large chunk of what's going on in the entire process, but we're also kind of limiting ourselves to these new opportunities that could exist.
Mm-hmm. Which brings us to our 3-step series. This week, we're going to talk about measurement. And we really want to get this down because it lays the foundations for you to not only set up for attribution success, but it lays the foundations for your optimization success. And when you're able to optimize and you're able to increase and measure these conversions properly, that's just going to put more money in your pocket by decreasing the amount of cost per conversion and potentially even increasing your conversions. And it's really important that we set up success today. So that's what we're going to be going over.
Perfect. So we're going to talk about measurement and how we can correctly track all of the conversions that matter. We'll talk about attribution and acting later on in this month as we continue this series, and then some advanced measurement tactics after that. But let's talk about measurement. Yay! So businesses that correctly track key metrics grow at a faster pace. Okay, so let's think about what that means. Businesses that correctly track key metrics grow at a faster pace. Why would this be the case? Well, I think this makes sense because if we're correctly tracking all of the key metrics, so across the board, the things that actually matter for this business, then of course they're going to grow faster because it means that they know what's working, they know what's not working. Their ROI is going to be a lot, higher. Their cost per lead, cost per acquisition is going to be a lot lower, which means that they have more money to actually reinvest in the business. So if we really understand these key metrics and understand how to track them, this is how we're going to be able to grow at a much, much faster pace.
Exactly. It's essentially aligning their business decisions with their KPIs and measuring everything. And we'll get into that a little bit longer.
KPI, key performance indicator. We really like our little acronyms
we
here.
We do.
So basically the question that we're trying to ask ourselves is, do you know what happens after a user clicks through to your site? Now, I know that you guys probably have some of your advertisers who are a little bit myopic in terms of clicks, click-through rate, or even conversions, phone calls, that type of things. So you can see here that there are a lot of steps that happen that we can focus on. We can look at, when a user actually completes a search. Are they showing up? Are they viewing this business's ad? Are they actually clicking on the ad? So what's the click-through rate? What's the rate at which that's happening? Are they getting to your website? Do they actually, was that an accidental click or was it real? But then the question that we need to ask ourselves is, what's actually happening after they get to your website? Now, if you guys remember from previous live streams, which I'm sure you do, I'm sure you guys are all big fans and seen them all, you guys might remember that 96% of the time that a user first visits a site, they actually don't convert or don't take that action that marketers want them to take. So what does this mean? It means that 4% of the time we understand, what's actually happening because we know that they clicked and they completed that hard conversion. That means that 96% of the time it's a black box unless we're measuring this stuff. So this is why it is so incredibly crucial. And just a point here, if any of you guys work with automotive, that is where I love the automotive space. One thing that dealers get really stuck on, which can be really frustrating, is they see all of this data, all of they see where they're showing up. They're very, very interested in, are people seeing their ad? They're very interested in their click-through rates. They're very interested in those conversions, which in a lot of cases for dealerships can be phone calls, right? And they get really mad because we're running all this advertising, we're paying so much, but for our new cars or our used cars, we're not seeing phone calls. Now, the problem with this is that the way in which we engage with dealerships has changed dramatically. So we're doing so much research up front, right? We're actually only visiting 1, maybe 2 dealerships when it comes time to purchase. So no longer is that the way in which we're contacting the dealership. We just walk right in and test drive and buy. So we have to make sure that we're focusing on these key metrics that are happening between them actually visiting the site and them converting.
Exactly. The path to purchase is so complex now. And this is a stat I always tell people, and I would encourage you to write it down. It takes an average of 7 interactions with your company, with a new time company, for someone to actually convert. I mean, I'm an Amazon Prime user, and it still takes me an average of 3 times of interaction with a product before I convert. So it's a very important stat, and that'll enable your remarketing success as well.
Yeah, an interesting correlation there. Actually, the more wine you have, the lower that number tends to be. At least for me. I don't know if that's
true.
Yeah, is it? Is it? All right, cool. So the really awesome thing about this is that with online advertising, you don't have to guess how you're performing, right? We have, the days of I threw up a billboard and, have a TV spot and did they see it? Did they not? I don't know. I can measure a couple different things. That is really shifting with online advertising. I do want to say, though, this is a double-edged sword. And you guys might know this, all my sales reps and account managers on the call, you guys might know this because although we can see what's happening and we don't have to guess how we're performing, digital is held to an incredibly high standard because we can see this information. Am I right?
Exactly.
Yeah. So, if that means that TV or radio or some of these other traditional mediums, they don't have that transparency, so they're not scrutinized as deeply. So this is why online advertising can be a little bit tough in this area.
I mean, when billboards first came out, when radio first came out, when newspaper ads first came out, they weren't held to that high of a standard. I mean, we have these tracking capabilities now with in-store conversion tracking, and we're getting closer and closer to measuring the full sphere of our marketing. And we really need to adhere to these best practices we're about to get into in a little bit.
Yep, absolutely. So before we get into these best practices, let's just, I want to reiterate this point because it's so incredibly important. One, enable conversion tracking. So make sure that you have conversion tracking enabled for AdWords to understand when your visitors are completing these actions that you want them to take. So these are these harder actions, might be phone calls, might be form leads, might be an actual purchase if it's an e-commerce site. But step one is make sure you have conversion tracking enabled. Okay, that is step one. Now, the thing that's important to note is that just tracking sales or those harder conversions is not enough. We need to make sure that we're measuring every single moment that matters to the business. So this could be, we'll come up with some examples here, but we need to make sure that that hard conversion is not the only thing that we're tracking, as we talked about in the automotive example, right? Because this can be misleading in terms of what's happening. And when we'll dig into mobile a little bit, and, as Logan was talking about, hey, mobile's not really converting for me. Does this mean that I should cut it? Well, that could really look that way if you're only, measuring these really hard conversions. So the really cool thing about our tools, Google AdWords, Google Analytics, is that you can actually measure a wide variety of interactions or these sort of micro conversions or goals, if you will, based on whatever your business needs are. So here's a smattering of nice little logos for you. So, it's everything from actual purchases to phone calls to smaller things like, did they play a video? Did they, visit your social media? Did they, download a white paper, whatever it might be. So we can look at cross-device activity. We can measure all of these different interactions, which is really, really crucial in terms of the measurement process.
Yeah, and if you take an e-commerce client, for example, they're typically measuring just that final conversion, that final sell of a t-shirt or shorts, whatever it is. But what is starting that interaction? Maybe people who sign up for their newsletter, people who sign up for their blog, are the ones who are most likely to convert. If that's the case, if that's the first interaction for your company, or maybe it's Instagram, maybe it's another thing like that. Consider
it's probably not Instagram.
You're right. You're right. It's probably G+ page.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
And essentially, you want to be able to track what is this first interaction point. And I know we've been talking about mobile, but the same thing goes for display. The same thing goes for YouTube. Those are great first interactions for your clients, but they often don't get the end conversion.
Yes.
So.
And you can think about it if you guys are familiar. I know you are. I love the buying funnel. Love me the buying funnel, right? The buying funnel. So these things are closer to the top of the funnel, but it does not mean that they're not important. So we want to make sure that we're seeing the actions that are actually being taken on the way down to that conversion and what that advertising is doing, providing a lift to that end conversion. Because, it's not mince words. The conversion, the sale is the most important part. But if we're not measuring these things along the way, then we're not really clear on what's actually contributing to that conversion.
Exactly.
Awesome. So this means that measuring these conversions accurately is imperative. We need to make sure that we're measuring them, but measuring them accurately. So Logan's going to jump into some best practices, plural, in terms of measuring these things accurately.
Yeah, we're going to hook you guys up right here. So these are some of the best practices, and we're going to kick things off on the right foot. So I'm going to go through each of these and kind of explain a little bit of how you do them, but mostly why you should be doing them. So in the first one, if we can go to the next slide, link Google Analytics to AdWords. Why you want to do this is because Google Analytics offers great insights for what users are doing after the click. Google Analytics is great offering insights, while AdWords is great offering not only insights, but action. And once you link the two, you're able to share remarketing lists, you're able to share goals, you're able to see e-commerce reports inside of your analytics accounts. And furthermore, you're able to see, which ads are driving higher bounce rates, which is not a good thing for certain sites. You can take that information and switch up the landing page of a certain ad in your AdWords account. Take that action right away from the insights from analytics.
Yeah, and the great thing about linking AdWords and analytics is you can see the analytics data in AdWords and act on that there, but you can also see the AdWords data in analytics and kind of get some deeper insight into what's happening, location, things like that, some really, a little bit more specific information coming from your AdWords campaign. So
and this will also, yeah, exactly. And this will also provide Google reps more information if you have a Google rep out there. So increase your look back window. What a look back window is that it's showing you when a user clicks on the ad between the time they actually convert. And increasing your look back window from the average of 30 days will really set you up for that attribution success. As we've been talking about, there's a longer path to purchase. There's a more complex path to purchase. So by increasing that look back window, you're just going to be setting yourself up for success. And there's multiple ways that you can try to find the best look back window. We typically recommend definitely something over than 7 days so you have enough data, but we really want you to increase it past 30 days.
Can I ask you a quick question, Logan? So on the look back window, is this going to be different depending on what type of business you have?
That's a great question. So exactly. So let's take a diamond ring company, for example. That's a pretty large investment for most of us. That's going to be a longer purchase path. Rather than someone just purchasing a t-shirt. So you want to make sure you're getting all those different touch points, whether they're going from display to YouTube to Google to search. You want to make sure you're tracking all of that. So increasing your look back window will allow you to see which ads are adding more value earlier on in the path.
Yeah, that makes complete sense. I would know nothing about diamond ring purchases, but moving on.
Yeah. So this one, track the value of conversions. And what you want to do here is this will set you up for really measuring your ROI a little bit better. Rather than making it harder on yourself and trying to track ROI outside of AdWords, you're able to dynamically insert, and I want to use dynamically very simply. All it allows you to do is just change the value of the amount of your products that you sell. So if you sell boots on your site for $20, you sell shirts on your site for $10, you can insert those dynamic values into AdWords.
Where are you shopping? $20 boots, $10 shirts?
Oh man, dang. I wish. Forever 21? I don't know.
Okay, we are learning a lot about each other this live stream.
All right, so essentially what you want to do here is that you can include these different dynamic values to make it more actionable, and so you can see the ROI from your advertising opportunities here.
Brilliant.
This one, so include every conversion action. So there's different conversions that'll matter more to your business. Obviously, the end sale will matter more to you because that's what's putting cash in your wallet. And something like an email signup could be a great conversion, but it's not something that's going to actually help you out. It's not going to be something that drives revenue for your business. So what you want to do is that you want to include that main conversion, like the actual end sale, into the conversions column, because what that is going to allow you to do is use automated bidding to optimize against those conversions that matter most to your business. And you want to exclude something like a blog post or a newsletter sign up because you don't want to optimize for those end conversions.
And why is automated bidding so important?
Automated bidding is so important because it really takes the heavy lifting off all of your manual bidding. It's something that you want to try to progress to.
Yes. I've heard really good success stories from it. But it can be kind of like that black box. Sometimes people like that control.
Yes.
Very good.
Cross-device conversions. So as we said before, 75% of all conversions are happening on one device and then ending on another. So you want to make sure that you include these into the conversions column so you optimize appropriately. And these are happening more and more often, even with the addition of more devices. I mean, think about it now, we have smartwatches. So you want to make sure these are included into your conversions column.
And that is as simple as a little click of the box, am I right?
Exactly right. So all you have to do is go into your tools, go into settings, and you just literally click a checkbox. With most of these topics that we're talking about, it's very extremely easy to implement these best practices.
Yes. Click of a box. Can't get any easier than that.
Choose the correct conversion count. This one's important because you want to make sure you're counting one lead and every conversion action. So you want to count when someone buys multiple products because that's more money for you. But you only want to count one lead because you only want to count unique leads. someone could submit the same lead from a different location, for a different time, but you don't want to count that. You want to count the conversions, and this is just a best practice. Count one lead, count multiple conversions, count multiple purchases.
That makes sense. Totally makes sense. Oh, and my favorite, red flags.
Red flags.
I'm good at missing these.
So now that you've set up your conversion tracking, you want to look out for these red flags. And we recommend adding the Chrome extension. It's free, the Google Tag Assistant. And this will allow you to see which conversion tracking codes are working, your analytics codes are working, your remarketing codes are working. So we recommend that you look out for these red flags after your conversion tracking is enabled and set up.
So let's go through a couple of these. So some red flags. This one is pretty obvious. You've installed conversion tracking. You've installed the code, but your account is not getting any conversions. Now, this might just be that you need to rethink maybe your business model, but it could be also that this is a red flag and you're not set up correctly. Right. Additionally, you're spending on mobile ads, but not receiving any mobile conversions. We were mentioning before that mobile conversions tend to be a little bit lower than desktop conversions, but it doesn't mean that you shouldn't be receiving any. Am I right?
Yeah, I mean, and we're trying to get there with mobile. We have best practices for UX so people can better and easily check out on mobile devices. We have AMP pages that really make it easy for people to load and work offline on their mobile sites.
And AMP, what is that?
Accelerated Mobile Page. Yes. And this is essentially, a lot of companies have adopted it, but speed is quintessential for mobile. And the most frustrating thing for when they're accessing mobile sites is that it's slow. And that could be a factor that's impacting your mobile conversion rate.
Yes, but if you are spending on mobile ads and you're not seeing any conversions and you've kind of already looked at this stuff, this could be a red flag that you're not set up correctly. Another one, your conversion rates might be too high. Now, this might at first look exciting. Maybe they're above 50%. But this might also mean that you have implemented the code wrong, because this is very unusual and kind of outside the realm of normal.
Right.
And then finally, your conversion counts actually differ drastically from those registered in your internal reporting. And this is something that we see often. Businesses are looking at their internal reporting. They have their register, their own kind of way of tracking, and then they're also looking at their conversions from their online advertising. And there might be some discrepancies, of course, there always are, because when we're looking at two different systems, certain things can count in one and not the other. There can be things that fall through. There's many reasons this could happen. But if there's a drastic difference, this could be a sign that things are not kosher.
And you could potentially change that with the correct conversion count, like we just talked about earlier.
And so this is really easy if you use Google Tag Assistant, which is a free Chrome extension. Love me some Chrome extensions. And this one you can see if your tags are working properly or not. So very smart. I wish they had red flag monitors in real life.
Maybe for the wine consumption.
Yeah, that's probably a good idea. It's like, boop, boop, Jesse, stop drinking. Boop, boop.
No more purchases.
I know, they're like, I can see them back in the back of the studio. They put my wine away. They're totally hiding it from me. So this, we're going to have time for questions. So please be putting in any questions that you have. We're going to check that in just a second. But just want to take a second and I'll let Logan kind of expand on this. But this has been, we talked about, this is kind of a 3.5 part series where we're talking about measurement, attribution, acting on that, and then we're going to go into some advanced kind of measurement stuff. But next week is attribution. So
right, exactly. So I hope you learned a little bit of the insights of best practices on how to implement these conversion trackings. And maybe by the time of next week rolls around, you've actually implemented most of these. And what we want you to do is, once you start getting these conversions down right, you can start optimizing, and then you can get into attribution. And attribution will really unlock a lot of touch points with you, not only for you, for your clients, for your businesses, because you're going to be able to see which interactions are driving the most impact for you. I'm sure a lot of conversions right now are coming from your brand searches or your brand campaigns, meaning it's the actual name of your product or your service. But when we start thinking about attribution, we're going to be able to see, all right, maybe it's the more generic search terms that are driving the most impact and that first touch point. And without those, maybe you wouldn't have had as many conversions. So it's really just tracking to see which is driving the most impact for your business. And I'm really excited about that for next week.
Yes, attribution is one of my favorite topics. I really, really enjoy it. But measurement is really key to understand, what are those things that we're actually tracking? And then next week we'll talk about how to attribute them to the sale and actually give them the credit they deserve. So with that, thank you guys so much, and hopefully we will see you next week. But before you go, let's see what questions we have here. So I'll take this one.
Okay.
This is a good one, and something that I'm very passionate about is AdWords and Google Analytics. And the question is it difficult to link them? And the answer is no. It is very, very, very easy to link them as long as you have the admin access to both. You can go ahead and link them very easily with just a check of a box. So you can either link them in one or the other. But this is super simple to do and gives you incredibly valuable information. So very easy to do. You can just Google it, linking AdWords to Analytics, and it'll give you a step-by-step guide. All right, cool. So let's
cool.
We've got lots of good questions,
we do.
so I'll just let Logan tackle one of them.
So here's one right here. I have a few e-commerce clients. I'm seeing more mobile traffic than desktop traffic on their sites consistently, but mobile conversion rates are little to none. What would you suggest? So what I would suggest here is that you start thinking about potentially not only the speed of your mobile site, but the UX aspect of your mobile site. So is it easy for customers to check out? Is there an easy layout? Do people know where to go? Is it taking 10 steps for them to actually check out, or should it just take 3? So that's something that you should potentially look at as well. And we're actually launching a mobile site certification in the coming months for you to actually be able to go through and easily optimize your mobile site to address issues around mobile site conversions.
All right, great. And I'm just kind of reading through these. Are there any that you want to answer? They keep popping up.
Here's one right here. Logan, can you go over the relationship of KPI and businesses? You had said something about key metrics. Exactly. So it's really aligning. There's a lot of businesses that want to drive reach. They want to build awareness, but they don't have the correct metrics that tie back to that. Like, how can you measure reach and awareness? You have to tie that back to certain metrics. Potentially it's views if you're using YouTube. Potentially it's, we have brand lift surveys to see if someone's actually learned more about your brand or they actually know about your brand. So it's really tying something that's, we create this great video ad, we push it out. We want to engage users, but how do we know if that's actually driving impact for our business?
Yeah.
So you want to tie that back to a key metric to your business. So that's kind of what I'm getting at. Yeah,
so it's just really important to understand what your goals are, because sometimes business goals are different. So understanding which of these things that you should actually be focusing on. Here's one that's a little bit, this one might be a little easy to answer. We give clients the conversion pixels to put on their site, but a lot of SMBs don't know how to do that.
Yeah.
How do you help with that? That is pretty common, right? So they're like, what is this snippet of code? But there are definitely how-tos and step-by-step guides on the Google AdWords Help Center. So if you've not been to the Google AdWords Help Center, it's great, and it walks you through exactly how to do this.
Yes, and another tool that you can use is Google Tag Manager.
Yes,
so you can actually
point.
Just give them one code to implement on their site, and then you can go through and create their marketing list. You can go through and add the different conversions on your site. So they just have to go through and do it once, because I know there's always like, oh, we need to add this remarketing list because we just launched this new product. We just launched this video. Just have them include that Google Tag Manager code, and then you can go through and do the rest.
That's a great point. Yeah, Tag Manager is amazing. Keeps it really clean. This one's great, and I hear this one a lot, is if I track form submissions in AdWords as a conversion, should I do that if I already track them in analytics, or kind of vice versa? So this question comes up a lot. And the kind of essence of this question is, should I be tracking these things in multiple places? And this is, depends on your philosophy and kind of what you're looking at. But my rule of thumb is, if it's a hard conversion, like form submissions or phone calls or, conversions like that, you want to look at them in AdWords. It does not hurt to track them in analytics also, but analytics is just great for tracking those kind of micro conversions, like, did they play a video? How long are they staying on the site? Are they very engaged in, my vehicle description pages or whatever it might be? So I'd say it's completely fine to look at them in both, especially if a form fill lead on your site is as simple as a destination goal, meaning you have a thank you page, not a bad idea to track it in analytics as well, so that you can slice and dice the data that way, and kind of, that way you have these, tables that you can, these pivot tables you can look at in analytics directly, but no harm in tracking in both places.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Let's see. Any other ones that you want to take?
Let's see this. So for the attribution you were speaking of, is it recommended to have odometry, or can it be determined through GA? So this we'll get into a little bit about next week. And I'm just going to touch on a little bit, but right now Google AdWords has attribution only for Google search. They plan to go into display and video. And for Google Analytics, you can actually see attribution for your display, for your referrals, for things like that. And we'll get into that a little bit next week.
Cool. And this one is a little bit broader. Can you speak on tracking phone call conversions that come from ads? So this can be done in a few different ways. There are, with Google Analytics, there is a phone call tracking, component to it. So you can track phone calls, but there are some limitations. You can't record the phone call through AdWords, but you can use third-party. There are lots of third-party services that actually you can record the phone call, but you can set duration goals. So make sure it's of a certain duration to know that it's actually a lead. So that type of thing. So you can definitely track the phone call conversions through AdWords with the already set up call metrics, but there are some deeper things you can track if you were to use a third party.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Great.
Here's one right here. Can you give an example of a key metric for an example business? So I'm just going to go with the clothing example again. And what we can look at here is, like, let's think about it from the marketing funnel. So build awareness, influence consideration, action, and loyalty. So if a clothing company is trying to, launch their brand, they're trying to build awareness, they could potentially start out on YouTube, make a video, and their key metric there should be looking at views. Not only views, but view through rate, as they get deeper into the funnel and start looking at the engagement metrics, or potentially when they get into that middle part of the funnel, when they're trying to engage users, look at the click-through rate. See how engaged users are. See if you're reaching the right audience. See if the target audience is attracted to that ad. And then when you move farther down into the funnel, you have those engaged users. You can look at people, and you can look at the harder conversions in that sales funnel, and see if people are actually converting. And then when you get down into grow loyalty, see how many people are in your email list, or see how many people are subscribing to your YouTube channel. So it's really just aligning your ad strategy to those right KPIs to show success.
Awesome. So I don't know if you want to look at any of these. I'm going to answer. There was a question down here that I want to answer, which is asking about Google Analytics and AdWords, and if they're separate accounts. If you want to see if there's any there that you want to answer. But while I answer that one, so the question is, if it is a client has a Google Analytics account that she has, and then you're running their AdWords, so can you connect them if they're separate? The answer is, it depends what you mean by that, but typically if you are, as the partner, you are running their account, then it is going to be very separate from the analytics account, and that is no problem to link them as long as you have admin access to both. So the particular issue that it looks like you're describing, this should not be a problem to link them, because these are going to be two separate kind of accounts there.
Mm-hmm. So this question right here, it's a little bit complex, but I'm just going to try to answer it. So how about when you have many clicks and not conversions, and the AdWords expending increase? Is this a red flag, and how Google can help understand if this, or if that a client is a real lead or a competitor that is trying to upset budget? So I would, first of all, make sure your tracking set up properly and see if you're actually getting conversions like outside of AdWords. And what I would really do is just focus on, conversions are great and you have to work towards those. Really look at the click-through rate rather than the clicks. See if your ads are engaging those users, because I think that's a better metric to look at than clicks, especially if you're trying to drive conversions. Because click-through rate, it's really clicks, click-through rate, and then conversions. So I hope that answered the question. We could go on for hours about that one, though.
Okay, so I'm seeing two questions that are very similar, so I'm going to try to tackle them both. They're essentially asking why sometimes the conversions in AdWords and analytics are different. So like 5 in one and 3 in the other. So as I mentioned before, when you have two different systems, you're always going to see some discrepancy, and it's just because of how they're measuring conversions. So as an example, let's take the form fill lead. That was one that we talked about before. So with the form fill lead, if we are in Google AdWords, we might actually have a conversion pixel that we're using on the site. So we might actually be able to see, you know, when they actually submit that, it's going to count as a conversion. Whereas in analytics, we might have that set up as a destination goal. So it fires when you actually get to the thank you page. Okay, so we could have them set up differently. They're attempting to track the same things, but they're tracking them in different ways often, which is going to show some discrepancies there. So this should not be alarming, especially if it's only that minor of a change. So that's why we see this.
Here's one. Logan, what is the tool I use to let me know if my keywords are correct? So I'm trying to figure out how to best answer this question. Keywords are correct, meaning I hope these keywords are driving conversions. There's multiple ones. I mean, you can look at the keyword planner when you're first starting out to see the forecasts of, you know, how many searches is this certain keyword getting per month. But then also next week, I'm assuming this will be great, is seeing how keywords line up in the attribution process. Are these keywords more generic? Meaning, you know, if I'm trying to buy a Ski-Doo, you know, the first search term that you could use would be, you know, new Ski-Doos. And then you start getting into, all right, I want fast Ski-Doos. And then you get into, you know, Kawasaki Ski-Doos or something like that.
Very
so
specific.
Yeah, I mean, I've ridden a few. I mean, you can't, you know, you never have a bad time on a Ski-Doo. But anyways, we're getting to that a little bit next week into attribution to see if your keywords are correctly set up to help you set up from the first interaction to the middle to the end.
Great. And speaking of attribution, I don't know if we want to try to tackle this one, but looks like this has kind of come up in a couple different ways, is can we set up the attribution model today and how many conversions are needed before we can set it up? So I'm not entirely sure what is being asked.
Yeah, so you can actually set up the attribution model today, but I would recommend having a little think about it with everyone in your organization, because it is something that you have to switch to. So there's a few different types of attribution models, which I would love for everyone to attend our next meeting next week.
Very deep into it.
But you can. It's very simple, and before even changing anything, you can do a model comparison tool. Jesse and I were just going through it yesterday, and
Yeah, so I think to add to this, just to kind of clarify the question, because I think now it's becoming clear, is you can actually change the way in which you attribute things in AdWords. So, you know, it's default set to last click attribution, but you can shift that to, you know, linear or time decay or some of the things we're going to be talking about next week. But I completely agree that if you are to go into analytics, you can see this and you can actually compare the different models and see what this looks like in terms of how you're attributing your traffic. So you can do that regardless. If you don't have a lot of conversions, the stat is not going to be very robust. But you can do that whenever you want to.
And the good thing about this also is that when you change your attribution, it's only changing it at that single conversion level. So you choose whichever conversion you want to change it to, a first click attribution to a last click. So it won't change everything drastically.
Great point. Great point. So this one's asking, how would you track one lead over the multiple conversions? So I guess the question is, if I am one lead, so I actually come into the business, but then I convert several times, how do you differentiate that?
So what I would do is I'd go back to that conversion count and count each lead as a single count conversion, because what that is going to allow you to do is track each lead as a unique lead, and then potentially set different conversions for each type of lead, so you know that they're unique, rather than having just like a conversion for everyone who submits a lead, go to that same thank you page for filling out a lead. Maybe consider having different tracking codes or different conversions for each type of lead. That could help solve that issue.
Absolutely, 100%. Looks like there are a couple more that we can answer. What do you recommend for tracking inbound calls as leads? and sales that result from them. So we kind of touched on this before, but I'd say, it really depends on what your goals are. So if you are interested in, depending on the industry you are, if you're interested in listening to those phone calls, then obviously you're going to want to use maybe a third-party system for the leads. But I do recommend tracking inbound calls as leads, and doing this. You can do this through, obviously, AdWords. We have that set up and in place, and you can set those duration metrics so that it's actually only a lead if it lasts for a certain amount of time. And then in terms of sales that result from them, this is a little bit tougher. This gets into actually, often if it's not an e-commerce store, this gets into tracking offline type of stuff, which is still a little bit difficult for smaller businesses to do. There's some sophisticated stuff if you are a really large business, but for smaller businesses, it's a lot harder.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know
Definitely.
if that can tackle that one. So this is, I think this is just talking about offline conversions. So suggestions for CRM or customer relationship management conversions. So tracking those conversions that happen offline.
Okay. So it depends how, we can go a couple ways here. What I would suggest is to reach out to your Google rep if you have one and see all the great opportunities we have for tracking things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But what I would also want to see is, tracking the softer conversions, meaning like time spent on page, pages per session, things like that. I hope that answered that question.
Yeah, there are different third-party tools you can use to actually track if the person that has actually purchased in the store based on the data in your CRM matches up to what you're doing online. But again, that gets really difficult for smaller businesses to have the volume and kind of budget to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So it does exist, but stay tuned. That stuff is getting a lot better.
Yeah.
And we'll dig into that a little bit more next week when we talk about attribution.
Mm-hmm.
And it looks like we have tackled nearly 20 questions for you guys. You guys were incredibly engaged. Love it so much. Thank you so much for joining us yet again. And Logan and I will be back next week for attribution to talk to you about some really fun attribution models. I am so excited. Are you excited?
I'm stoked. I'm ready.
All right. Well, until then, have a great rest of your week and weekend, and we'll see you next time.
See ya.